Every film that I've ever watched, I want to see in Atmos. Every song I've ever heard that I just love, I wish it was in Atmos. It's always my go-to now. It makes stereo feel just redundant. Because of that, and with the intention of telling a story or really conveying something that's meaningful to you, that you've put your heart and soul into, a powerful message or whatever it is, paired with Atmos, it is just another level.
Hi, and welcome to the Your Story Studios podcast, a podcast where we talk about all things content creation. And today on the show, I'm joined by Dan, and today we are talking about Dolby Atmos. Dan, what is Dolby Atmos?
Dolby Atmos is a awesome, fun, new technology. Well, it's not that new anymore, maybe 10 years old. It's sort of an evolution of surround sound, and it's sort of becoming the main way that we create, sound deliverables for music, film, games, all kinds of things. I guess where to start is what it looks like maybe before what it sounds like. Because traditionally you might be aware of two speakers, stereo, or mono is one speaker, one channel. And then, you have traditional surround sound, which is what they call channel-based. And the reason they call it that is because each speaker is defined by a certain channel. So 5.1 would be 6 channels. The subwoofer is the 0.1, and you have left, center, right, and 2 surrounds behind you. And that's 5.1. So with, then you have 7.1, which adds an additional 2 sides. So you might have rears, sides, and then the LCR. And
LCR is left, center, right.
That's right.
All right.
Yeah.
For our people
for anyone who doesn't know.
Yeah.
That's right. And, there's sort of, that's like the starting point for surround sound, and it sort of made things a bit more immersive. But, sort of Dolby Atmos took it to a whole new level because the way we actually mix surround sound is different now. So it's not just adding more speakers. It's actually a totally different way of telling the speakers what to play. With stereo or surround sound, like 5.1, 7.1, you would place a sound in your DAW, digital audio workstation, or, like Pro Tools or Logic or whatever. And you'd say, okay, a piece of dialogue that goes into the center channel. So that channel is pushing only the dialogue or whatever you're doing. And, you spread things out to wherever they need to be. But it's very much pushing which speaker the sound is coming out of. But with Dolby Atmos, it's more about the location in 3D space. Like it's a coordinate more than a speaker. So it really doesn't matter how many speakers at that point, because any speaker configuration can be, sort of extrapolated up or down from these coordinates that exist in this 3-dimensional space. So what it looks like in the renderer, the Dolby Atmos renderer that we use to create this, it's a cube, represented as a cube, and you have dots, which these dots are called objects. And you can assign a sound to an object or the bed. And the bed is the first 10 channels, which is more like a channel-based system where left is 1, right is 2, center is 3, 4 is the LFE or subwoofer channel. Not to be confused with bass management or like the sub of those channels. If you sort of think about listening to stereo and adding a subwoofer, the subwoofer is just playing the low-end information from those 2 channels. But this is dedicated subwoofer channel, so it's completely on its own, and that's why it's called an LFE or low frequency effects. So then you've got your sides, your rears, and 2 channels for height. So that makes up your 10 bed channels. Everything beyond that, up to 128, which is just the maximum for Dolby Atmos, are objects. So the idea there, 118 objects, means that these positions, you can place them anywhere within this cube. It could be there, wherever. And no matter how many speakers you have to reproduce that, it will try and accurately place them so they sound like that. And it adds reverbs and acoustical effects to ensure it sounds like it would if it was there. And because of that, it doesn't matter what system you play it on. It's sort of pretty accurate no matter what. So that's the reason why it's sort of taking over the industry, and it's become the industry standard for everything.
Yeah, and if someone that is listening or a part of our audience right now wants to be able to hear this, what would be your recommendation for them to be able to hear it?
There is a common misconception about hearing it. So I think when people say, is Dolby Atmos worth it? They're they're having this thought that for it to be worth it, they have to have a big system like this, 12 speakers around you or more, like a cinema or like a studio. And in my space, I have 14 speakers, which adds wide channels as well as your LCR. But the thing is, because it scales down to play on anything, it's sort of not about hearing it in its fullest form. It's about hearing it at all. And if you can sort of conceive of this idea that with 5.1, a channel-based system, the reason why it didn't take off in music, for example, is because it did require people to have a 5.1 system to actually hear it. So it was like, no, everyone has that. It's not worth it. And when you try and play a 5.1 thing on a stereo system, 4 of those channels just get cut off and you don't hear anything because there's no speakers to reproduce that. And there's no scaling property to put those things into a down mix for your stereo, system. So now with Dolby Atmos, it's not like that. It does scale down and it's kind of smart. So there's metadata embedded into the master. And when you play back, it works out exactly what system you have set up. So like it could be your TV, your soundbar, your phone, it could be a car. There's lots of places, you can listen to it now that are all Dolby Atmos compatible.
Your AirPods.
Yeah, absolutely. Yep. AirPods on an iPhone. And it will give you the maximum that is possible on that system. So for AirPods, it would just be stereo, but it actually creates a binaural version of the Dolby Atmos master. And I'll get into binaural in a minute, but I'll just finish this first. I guess the main thing is that it's not about hearing it in its fullest, because that could be 60 speakers in a massive immersive cinema. So not everyone has to have that to experience this. It's more about the fact that you can experience it at all and not have channels cut off, where that was the problem with 5.1. It's why music never took off with that. So now, with all of that said, I think, the binaural thing is a hot topic. Not everyone understands it, I think. The binaural thing, if you can imagine how our ears work, right? So I can click here. And how my ears work, the sound moves through the air, hits the little hairs in my ear, and I can tell where it's coming from, how loud it is, the frequency response, and that tells my brain where it is and all of those bits of information to understand my surroundings. And it's really like an evolutionary thing of how we kind of from survival back in the early days of mankind, where we had to find out there's a tiger over there that's going to come and eat us. So we need to be able to know where things are. And that's really how our ears work. Now that we've got, this ear is picking up this first, but this ear is also hearing it, but slightly delayed. And also, it's hearing less high-end information because the longer the wavelength or the lower the pitch, the more energy it takes to get there. So what that means is if you've ever gone into a club or a festival or a big show and you hear the bass first, doof, doof, doof,
hits you hard.
It does. And the reason for that you're not hearing the rest of it is because the higher frequencies have a shorter wavelength and they don't travel as far as the bass can. So you're hearing the bass first. That's the reason. So binaural is like re-engineering that idea, how our ears work, into a Dolby Atmos mix for stereo. So when you put headphones on, it emulates exactly how it would sound if you were listening to it on many speakers. And that's what the binaural is. So it's really like, it's a way to experience what it would sound like without it actually being fully around you.
It sounds very complex and smart.
It is. It is very complex and it's not perfect yet, but it's getting better every day. And there's a lot of people, that don't fully understand that it's a moving target, really. We can't make mixes specifically to nail that because they're developing the technology all the time.
Yeah, so it's kind of like AI. It's come a long way, but
absolutely.
It's not perfect, but it's getting better.
It is definitely getting better all the time. And the algorithm or the how Apple Music decodes Atmos for that, they have their own way of doing it, which is different again from Tidal or whatever else that can decode music. And even Apple TV and things like that can do it as well, binaurally to watch movies. So you get a better sense of this immersion where things have been panned in the mix to the sides, to the rears, above you, whatever, so that, a helicopter goes right over you and you feel it. But yeah, so it's compressing all that down into how acoustics works and how I can feel a sound moving all the way around me and what that actually sounds acoustically, not directionally, but it's tricking our brain to think that it's directional.
Yeah,
So-
I've used my AirPods with my Apple TV to watch some live sport.
There you go.
I'm a pro wrestling fan. So
Awesome.
I watched that and I can hear, and as I turn my head as well, the crowd kind of moves around
Yes.
and all the different sounds sound different. At first, when I first heard it, I was like, oh, that's kind of annoying because I wasn't used to it. But then you're like, wow, this is like a whole new immersive experience.
Absolutely. Yeah, it's another whole dimension on how we can, listen to, content. What you're talking about there as well is the head tracking thing.
Mm-hmm.
So that's really cool. Did you actually have a camera set up at all? It was not for that? Okay.
No.
So I think I'm not sure exactly, but you might have to like set up some sort of center point. Did you have to do that?
No, I don't think I did.
Interesting.
I just put them on. I started watching it and I remember turning my head and then hearing the audio sound different. I was like, oh, that's cool. Or
okay.
first I was like, oh, that's weird. And then, oh, that's cool. And then I don't know how I feel about this.
Well, that's a lot of people's experience. I think the whole thing with the binaural is that it's pretty cool. It's different, but it's not exactly accurate, and so it can be like, oh, something sounds off. That's what puts people, off it. But the idea is that that's just one way to listen to it. It's not meant to be the way. So it's trying to be a solution to not being able to hear it at all. That's the point. So the fact that you can hear it at all is it's working, but people misinterpret it not being perfect for this is what it is. Why do people want this? And that's not it. It's meant to be experienced in a big cinema or a big, immersive space so that it does feel really, really accurate and like you're there. But yeah, like I said, the technology is always getting better. And eventually I think it will be pretty seamless and you just completely forget that you're even wearing AirPods. It's like I'm just transported. And that's the ultimate goal of storytelling at all, I guess.
Yep. No, I completely agree. So we now know what Dolby Atmos is and binaural and all that fun stuff. Talk us through some projects that you've used this on, maybe starting off with a feature film.
My first feature film that I was working in Dolby Atmos, it's a bit of a funny story. So they're actually my family members. Luke C. Jackson is a published author and filmmaker, and his brother, Alex Jackson. They came to me with this project. It's called Verite. It's still not out yet, so I can't talk too much about it. But, it's been one of those, independent films that has taken longer to do just because, everyone's put so much love and passion and, a lot of stuff for free as well, just making this amazing project. And they've been able to do that because so many people were passionate about it and really saw its potential. So we originally started that very early in my surround immersive, exploration. And we're going to do it in stereo. And then we sort of realized, well, that's not enough. We have to do 5.1 at least, because that's like the industry standard for any meaningful international distribution. Then we were doing it in 5.1. And then we're like, well, how can we up the ante? How can we be bigger, better? And
How can we be trailblazers?
Yeah, like how do we take this to the next level? So then we turned it into 7.1. And then like all of these steps was, a huge leap from where we were before. And then finally, when I was like just totally into the Dolby Atmos thing, I was like, I think we should just go up again. Let's try and do this in Atmos. And Luke was really open to the idea. It's like, well, we've gone this far. Let's go as far as we can. Let's make it as cool as we can. Particularly because it was not a paid project. It was sort of like, well, there's nothing to lose here. There's no limitations. We may as well make it as good as we can so that is the reward. It's not about money. It's more about how good can we do this and how, just, do as much as we can. So,
and then it's a proof of concept and then you can get the next client.
Well, that's right. Yeah. I suppose that's definitely an upside to it, but we just wanted to make it as I'll say it again, immersive as possible. And that is a buzzword for sure. Like immersive, I'm pretty sure Dolby have actually trademarked that word and it just means Dolby Atmos now. Yeah, so we started with that, and to convert everything, I needed a bigger computer too. So like my little iMac, which did me so well for so long, but it was like a
Had to be
2013.
retired.
It did. It just wasn't strong enough. So I ended up on a Mac Studio M2, and
Was that spec'd out fully
yeah.
or?
Yeah, I did put a lot of extra into it. It's not fully, but like they're pretty powerful on their own.
Yeah, because it really needed it, or you just wanted to kind of future-proof yourself for a
Well,
few years?
yeah, I thought, future-proofing was always, I knew it was it's going to be my rock, it's my powerhouse.
Yeah.
It does everything. So I really needed something strong. So I got that, and I think I got a few tips if you're buying a computer, particularly for this kind of stuff or any sort of video production. With Macs, as you can't really add anything after the fact. So you got to spec it as much as you can, and it is worth it. So I went with the biggest, amount of cores as I could. And I think I went with a terabyte hard drive rather than the 250. So yeah, just things like that as much as I could.
And is there a reason you went Mac over PC?
Yes. So with Dolby Atmos, and this is not as true anymore, but it was when I'm using it, I suppose, because my DAW of choice, my DAW, is Logic. So that is a Mac-based program. So unfortunately, it just doesn't work on a Windows. So because of that, I was like, well, it's integrated with the Dolby Atmos renderer now, and a lot of the other ones are as well. But I prefer Logic over something like Pro Tools, and that's just my preference. Yeah, it's not to say any of the other ones aren't great, and they are. But I just know Logic so well. I've used it for so long.
It works for you.
It's my thing. Yeah, exactly. Mm-hmm. And there's no reason to fix what wasn't broken, I suppose.
Yeah.
So,
and when you're doing projects, are clients saying, oh, what program are you using? Are you using Pro Tools or Logic? Or do you find they don't care, they just care about the end product?
A lot of times, it's usually that no one cares. It's just, what can you do with it? But there have been a few times where it has mattered. Like there are things that Pro Tools does just so well that that's why it's the industry standard.
Yep.
And that's definitely been a factor sometimes. But for the
not
most
enough
part,
to make you go.
Yeah, no, not enough. Yeah, I think I've been able to consistently, prove I don't need to do that just yet. I'm sure at some point there might be a time where I just need to have it as well. But for now, it's working enough.
Mm-hmm.
So anyway, with that, I ended up getting a bigger computer that could handle the Dolby Atmos full project, because there is a lot of, there's a lot of CPU power using just the renderer itself, but also the plugins.
RAM.
Yeah. Yeah. So like all of that stuff is pretty heavy on it. And when you've got a few hundred tracks in a big session like that, and it's, it's an hour and a half movie, 2 hour movie. Yeah, it adds up, what you're doing a lot. So we've ended up with multiple sessions to try and consolidate it. So I ended up with the 7.1 mix that I'd pretty much nearly finished the movie that way. We stemmed it out into all the different groups of different things. So dialogue, sound effects, music, all of that stuff, as separate 7.1 files, and then re-imported that into a new Atmos session, and then continued and sort of added, the flare and reusing objects as well, because we found we used all of them, which is nuts. That's 118 doesn't sound like a whole lot considering we've got heaps of tracks, but the amount of different things that are moving at the same time, or even just from one scene to the next scene, they're doing different things, so you use different ones for it. Yeah, we ran out. So I had to automate a lot more in that. And that's just normal for films anyway, but I was automating these objects to be used for a sound effect and then a totally different thing just to be able to do it. So very computer heavy, but it worked and it's looking really good.
And how do you organize all these tracks?
Okay, so I'm really big on organization, particularly when you start a project. Color coding and labeling is really, really important. So I sometimes have an assistant that helps me go through all of that. But a lot of the time it's just me. So I will go through everything like production and tracks wise, and that's, all the dialogue on set or any reference tracks they've given me. And I will pretty much go through all of it. And before I even touch a fader, I'm color coding and labeling as I know they need to be. I might get rough panning in just so it kind of feels, right. And a lot of that's just in the center anyway. And then, editing is usually the next thing. So I end up with maybe double the tracks just from the editing because different things need different treatment. But yeah, that's really important, the organization, because with hundreds of tracks, you are going to get lost.
Absolutely. And just for context, were you on set for any of this recording or are you all post?
I'm usually all posts, but for other projects, I've definitely been on set a little bit to help with the post thing. So this is another movie now. And again, it's not out yet, so I can't talk too much, but I had to write all the music for a feature film based around a band because I wrote, recorded, and performed all the music on the record. They were then playing those demos on set, and I had to work with the musicians to make sure they were hitting the marks. And these are actors that haven't necessarily played that much before, so we had to work with them a lot to make sure that looked right to what I was actually doing and all that kind of stuff. So that I have been on set quite a bit for, and then there's corporate stuff as well. I am sometimes, but most of the time it's post.
Yeah. So you don't have that point of reference like, oh yeah, they recorded this, so I need to go find that. You're just given a whole bunch of files and then figure it out.
Pretty much, yeah. And look, people are pretty good now. Like they're pretty organized.
They?
Sometimes, yeah. Like there's definitely times where it's a bit of a headache to figure out, but most of the time I have a spec sheet and I sort of say, this is what I need from you. It's just like, make sure you label stuff. If there's an EDL or some sort of, edit decision list, that's helpful, just from the cut. Like it tells me at this time we use this audio from here to here, and then at this time we use this one. So I get all the files, but I also get, like the XMLs and all those different things as well. And it's just metadata with their cut, but just the audio files. So it opens up exactly as they had it. It's all these just different file types that help me open up the session in as clean a way as possible to just continue from where they were at. Makes it a lot easier. Even with that said, I will say there's I tend to prefer stems, and a lot of people go, why won't you use the AAF? And I'm sort of like, well, because it's too open for me to make decisions. I'd prefer for you to lock something down that you're happy with, and I start from there, so that I'm not potentially undoing things you're already happy with. So that's why I prefer it. It's just a choice of mine, I guess, because I've had that problem before where they give me too much power and then I make some decision or something to change it. And they're like, oh, why'd you take that out? Or why'd you, so it's a bit easier if they just give me exactly where they're at, helpful, like to know exactly what they're happy with, and I can just add my flavor to it,
Yeah. And for people that might be a little bit lost, what is a stem exactly?
Okay, so a stem, I should say multi-track. So multi-track is the raw session mixed down into individual files for each audio track. So that could be a lav mic, a boom track. So that would be two stems, multi-track of two tracks. Stem typically means mixed track, which is not really what we're talking about, but everyone just says stems. So it means the same thing essentially, but when I'm talking about using stems, I want to have, so it's like the whole film as edited on the tracks that they've already set, and it's like all of the film on this channel, all of the film on this channel, and then there might be silence in between or whatever, but I can see it and everything is exactly in the right sync already. So all I've got to do is import the video and all of those stems, and everything just plays exactly as they had it. And then I'm free to add or fix. But as opposed to the AAF or whatever, which allows me to drag and move things, that sometimes is too much power.
Yeah, no, I understand that. And do you find having time code really helpful?
Yes, on the video, 100%. Yeah, because that's really helpful for so initial sync. There might be a 2-pop on it, which is it's like that 4-3-2 beep, that 2 beep. There's things like when I'm rendering out, I'll need to make sure it's all properly synced to where they're gonna cut it, because they'll cut that bit off, and I need to make sure that it's all still in sync. So those things are really important.
Yeah, great. Now you've created this great sounding immersive experience. How do you then get it from your computer to my ears?
So depending on how you're using it, it could be in a DAW that has the renderer inbuilt, or it could be through the external Dolby renderer. It's more just a setup thing, how you're using it. But essentially what happens is you create a master file which is actually three files of metadata with different pieces of information that all make up it's the volume and the where the objects are and all of those things over time. And you create that, and that's your biggest deliverable, I suppose. But that doesn't translate to anything until you create these proper files for delivery. So usually for music and for film, they'll usually ask for the ADM, which is it's a WAV file that has all the metadata in it. So that includes all the volume and everything, all the channels, first 10 bed tracks, plus all the objects, all within one file. So they can put that up on Apple Music and it can be decoded. You can also create the re-renders, which could be more like the channel-based stems you might require for making a DVD. Or, if anyone's done that before, essentially you have to assign the left channel to the left speaker. Yeah, essentially you've got to add those things together. So it will ask you for, give me the left, give me the right, give me the center, and you just add your files to that. So to make that, you use what's called a re-render, and it just gives you a stem-based, like interleaved or separate file structure like 5.1, 7.1, stereo, binaural, that can be then used any way you want. So all of that, it's sort of up to the encoder, I guess, or that's encoded in Atmos, and then the decoder, which is your playback system, reads that and says, well, I have this system, 5.1 or stereo. So it plays back the best for that.
Great. And between a feature film project and, say, a song or a band project, what's the biggest difference using Dolby Atmos?
I would say with a film, there's so many more moving parts. So you have a lot of, like I said, with the objects being reused, or, you got to automate a lot. In a song, I don't think I've ever used all of the objects. It's pretty rare that you would need to.
Otherwise, that'd be a very busy track.
Oh yeah, yeah. And it's not always about it, moving all around you all crazily all the time. It's more about the feeling of it. With a song as well, there's kind of two approaches to it. If you have an emulation of a space, so if you're in an arena and you're watching a band in front of you, there's speakers, on the side, the line array, and you've got the reflections off the walls, there's the crowd or the whatever, and you can feel it's very much front, but you're hearing an ambience of everything as well. So you could create that experience for the song where it very much is very front heavy, but then you're hearing the reflections, the acoustic elements of the space, the reverb of the room. And that can be one approach. The other approach is where you are literally inside of the song, and that is... I prefer that approach, but it's... I
was going to ask, what's your preference?
Yeah, I do prefer that, but it sort of depends what mood the song is. Sometimes it's just too much. So you don't want to necessarily, just because you can, have things flying over your head and it's nuts, because that's quite disorienting as well. You're not trying to pull apart the song. You're trying to enhance it. That's something that, really depends on the song, which approach you might take, or, there's probably others as well, or maybe a blend between the two.
Are there any tracks that come to mind that you can talk us through, do a bit of a deep dive?
Yeah, there was one song I actually did. It's a cover of Veronica's song, and my sister was singing it actually. It was just for a bit of fun. This was not even a professional project. This was just me kind of dipping my toe in, but also she was singing. And unfortunately, we don't get to do this much, but it was such an incredible experience to do that because she's got an amazing voice. And the thing was, she was singing this song. It was such an emotional song. And I felt when the harmonies came in, that took me to another level, just stereo. So then when I moved them out to the sides and the rears, and it just really, really hit hard. And I was like, wow, that is the power of this. When at the right moment for the song, it's like really about the songwriting as well. You can use the production of like producing where the harmonies come in, at what point does this thing happen or whatever, and that creates the dynamic of the song, which really is emotionally, resonant as well. And then when you add the Atmos elements to that, where they're coming from all around you, that's incredible.
Yeah, great. And for the audience right now, if they're thinking, oh, this sounds really interesting, I'd like to use this on a future project, what would you say to them to get them over the line?
I think the main hurdle for people to understand it or see the worth in it, obviously it can be a quite expensive thing. The reason why I would always, not sometimes, always opt for this is because it's future-proofing. What's the reason you're making music? What's the reason you're making a film? And the underlining reason, I think, for everyone who's in this for the right reasons would
Is
be
money, yeah.
exactly. No, I think, yeah, it's about that emotional transference. It's about getting a piece of yourself, your heart, your mind, and giving that to somebody for them to take in their own way. And that's a beautiful thing. That's a relationship between the audience and the filmmaker or the artist. And Atmos just helps that delivery and that feeling of complete understanding and immersion. It really is a buzzword, but it just does that so naturally and effortlessly that every film that I've ever watched, I want to see in Atmos. Every song I've ever heard that I just love, I wish it was in Atmos. It's always my go-to now. It makes stereo feel just redundant. And even other surround formats like 5.1, they're just obsolete compared. I just feel like Atmos is so much more, that you just don't expect to feel. Because of that, and with the intention of telling a story or really conveying something that's meaningful to you, that you've put your heart and soul into, a powerful message or whatever it is, paired with Atmos, it is just another level. And I wish everyone could hear it how I do in my studio. And that's not always possible, but you can definitely get a sense of that is beyond anything else, even in the transference and the re-renders, the lower formats. Even in stereo, I found that if you're watching an Atmos thing in stereo, it's still better than actual stereo.
Yeah. So if your favorite bands with their favorite songs still had like the Pro Tools or whatever files, would they be able to remix it for Dolby Atmos, or would they have to re-record the music all over again?
When we're recording, we're still dealing with mono and stereo sources. So in the real world, you might have a single microphone on something, or a couple of microphones. And people are actually using multi-microphone setups to capture the room or the space in an authentic way that are sort of positioned like the Atmos bed field. So left, center, right, 2 surrounds or whatever, and then 2 facing the ceiling. So you kind of get the sense of the space in the real place. But we're still dealing with individual microphones, mono and stereo. So to do that, you could really use anything, any source you can remix in Atmos. And that is a process a lot of people are doing. Some people record things specifically with Atmos in mind, but a lot of the time up till now, of course, nothing's been in Atmos until recently. So everyone's sort of going back through their catalogs and re-releasing with the same music. They're not re-recording it, they're remixing it in Atmos. And you can actually go onto Apple Music and listen to the original stereo and then flip the Atmos version and feel how different it is. Like they're side by side.
Yeah, awesome.
And it's usually like there's a lot of less than, it's a pretty new thing. So a lot of people are still working out how to do it. And, there's no perfect way to do it. Yeah, some of the Atmos mixes I've heard, like 1,000% are better than the originals.
Awesome. That's a lot.
That's huge. Yeah, that is huge.
Well, thank you, Dan, for coming on the show today and telling us all about Dolby Atmos.
No problem at all. Thank you for having me.